Welcome back to the Successful Diligence podcast. I am really grateful that you are back for another episode. I never take it for granted that you tune in and you listen to the podcast, you watch the podcast on YouTube, and you interact, you comment, you send your voice messages, you send your emails. I really do have the absolute best audience ever, hands down, and I so appreciate you. We are in season 3, which I am loving so far. I hope you are too. Comment below what your thoughts on the first episode of season 3, how you thought it went, what you think, in terms of the topic. And I have another epic guest tonight. His name is Justin Atherton, and he has been on the show in season 2. So I really encourage you, if you haven't heard of him before and you want to get more background, because we're not going to go into too much of his background except for the bio that I'm about to read, go back and listen to season 2, episode 324, as well as episode 340. And you will thank yourself after you do that, because Justin is a badass. He is like one of the most stellar men on the planet. And it's not only because of where he's come from or what he does, but who he is now and how he shows up in the world. And I'm just such a fan. Now, Justin has over 14 years of law enforcement experience in SWAT investigations, officer training, and leadership roles. And that includes being a detective as well. So he's a pretty smart guy. You're not going to run a lot of BS by him. And in dealing with numerous high stress and volatile people and situations, Justin learned that integrity in every aspect is the most important factor in whether a man succeeds or fails. And after departing the SWAT team, he launched his company called Confidence Unchained. And that company teaches leadership principles to men and women who are selected, but mostly to men from any walk of life. Business owners, CEOs, entrepreneurs, the man on the street, if you just want to better yourself, men from all walks of life, people from all walks of life. And his program and his coaching are not for everybody, but they detail the mindset and the principles that enable detectives and SWAT teams to accomplish the most difficult missions. And Confidence Unchained shows you how to apply them in any situation, any family, any person, or any organization. And Justin's helped men across a broad range of industries build their peak performance, regain their edge, which is an acronym, y'all. And he is also the co-host of the amazing podcast that I have been blessed and honored to be a part of as well, the Actions and Limits podcast here on YouTube. So go over there and subscribe. Justin, welcome back to the show.
Michelle, thank you so much. That was probably one of the best lead-ins I've ever had. Talking about how I don't know. Thank you so much for that. I'm glad to be back, Michelle, and I hope we can share a lot of insight with your audience. You're doing some great stuff, Michelle.
Thank you. This conversation is going to be epic. And what's really cool about your intro and your bio is that it's all true. And so that's one thing I love, is to tell the truth. And listeners, I'm always talking about tell the truth, show up in truth. That is integrity. And everything that came out of my mouth about Justin is absolutely true, hands down. So Justin, we're not going to go into too much of the background because, as I said, the bio, episode 324, episode 340, go listen to it, check it out. You can also go to his website, which is
confidenceunchained.com.
really easy. The link will be below as well for those who didn't listen. But I want to really get into the content, and I really want to get into the expertise and the amazing wisdom bomb and nuggets and all of the things that you're going to bless my audience with. Cause you open your mouth and we get into the flow, which we need to talk about too, that I always interrupt. And we're just going to break it down. So let's explore first the word confidence. When you say Confidence Unchained, what the heck are you talking about?
Well, we touched on it a little bit before in the last episode, and you got my mind running with you're really crafting what it is, because I get asked that a lot. Like, what is confidence? How can I improve my confidence? How can I be a more confident person? And I don't see confidence as being a skill. It's more of the totality of your behavior. because it's really something in the perception, in the things that you do and the things that you don't do. So it's not really one skill that you can work on. Confidence is almost in a perception by someone else of how you behave.
So is it a noun? Is it a verb? Is it an adjective?
You know, I guess you would say it's a noun, because
Okay.
it's someone else's perception of what's going on. But I wouldn't label it a skill, because you can't work on being confident by itself. It's not something you can isolate. It's more of, like I said, the totality of your behaviors and things that
Well,
you do or the things that you avoid doing.
yeah, and I get that, right? But there's a
Mhm.
lot of people out there who are like, "Well, I don't feel confident. I don't feel like I am showing up in confidence. I want more confidence. I feel like
Sure.
the imposter syndrome, which I think is being worn out today."
Mhm.
And for me, imposter syndrome is really just fear. It's fear of showing up in truth. That's just my opinion,
Sure.
and perception, which is a whole nother podcast. But for those people who attribute confidence as a feeling, how do you make that mindset shift that confidence is an action? It's your behavior, it's how people perceive you. Because I remember back in my 20s when I was a train wreck walking, and people would look at me because I was graduating from Columbia, and I walked in a room shoulders back, held head high, because that was my training from childhood, right? But it
Sure.
had nothing to do with the way I acted, my integrity, or how I felt. So people would say things like, "Oh, you're so confident." And I'd be like,
Mhm.
"What are you talking about? I don't even trust myself. Confident what?" So, like, for people like who I used to be, how do you even start on the confidence road?
I think the idea is not focusing on it. It's almost an idea of, like, trying to achieve perfection,
Mm,
because a lot of it comes from owning who you are. I talk a lot about the authenticity piece and just being who you are, and going at it 100%. Not comparing yourself to someone else and saying, "Oh, I wish I was more like them, so I'm going to try to be like them or achieve things like." Do what you want to do. Behave as you want to behave, as long as you're not harming others and not creating immoral behavior around you. But act like you want to act, not like you think you should, or based on what your job or your career choice is. So I think a lot of confidence is tied up with being your authentic self and just owning that.
which I love. And I have to say that when I started to tell the truth about who I was and accept myself for who I am and all of my unique quirkiness that is me, unapologetically unpolished and quirky, but yet also highly skilled and highly knowledgeable and insightful and empathic, all the things that make me me, right? Flaws and all. Perfection is an illusion. It doesn't exist. Another one of my opinions.
Yes.
Um, and I talk about in my book, actually, about owning. You have to own yourself before you can actually gift yourself to anyone or to the world. You can't
I
be
like
paying the
that.
mortgage on yourself. You got to own yourself. So I definitely ascribe to that. um Shifting to men, though, because men are not always socialized to be. They're socialized to do, to imitate, and to
Sure.
ascribe to a socialized notion of what a man is, right? So how do you work with men? I mean, and when I say that, you know, we're socialized. Men is the provider.
Sure.
Men are supposed to be strong. They're supposed to be, not weak. They're supposed to be protectors. They're supposed to stand up and lead the way. They're
Yeah.
supposed to be strong and not cry. Like there's socialized, ideas and
Sure.
metaphors that come through. So for men who are like, I don't know, that's not me. And I know that's not me, but that's the standard that's been communicated to them. How do you work with men to tap into that inner ownership so that they can be confident?
It is a tough thing to attack, because there are a lot of social stigmas that go along with it. And I think that's where this idea of toxic masculinity creeps in, to where, like, oh, it's what society says a man is supposed to be. So then what happens with that idea is you end up getting men who are afraid to be a man. They're afraid to be manly. They're afraid to do certain things that are related with this made up notion of toxic masculinity. It's basically don't be a jerk, and it doesn't matter what your gender is. And so I've had this conversation before because there's a bell curve, whether it's men or women. We have, masculine energy and feminine energy, right? Just like the way that we behave. And if you are a man that feels more comfortable acting what would be considered more feminine, that's fine. Own it. Because don't try to, be this picture like, oh, I have to act like Arnold Schwarzenegger or whoever that is in your head that you're putting up there as like the man to be. Don't feel like you have to act like that. And then the other side of it, you get, manly men that are being told that it's bad to be a man. And they're like, well, I guess I have to mute myself some. I have to dumb this down. So I can't be the man that I really feel like I should be because that's toxic. So throw all those silly notions out. And however you feel comfortable being you, just do that. Like people are going to have perceptions of you regardless, and
That's
you
true.
can't control that. And everyone has that first impression, right? I know I give off the first impression of being a jock. I did play sports, in high school and college, and I'm a physically fit person, and I fit that image of being a jock. But if you talk to me for more than 5 minutes, you realize that there's a lot more there. I'll actually call myself an undercover nerd. I've been playing chess since I was like 6 years old. I was like a Star Trek guy growing up. I love playing all the board games and stuff. It's so the perception is crap. Someone else's views of you, like it doesn't make sense. So it's about being who you really are. So it really comes back to the authenticity and just owning that and not trying to fit into what society says you're supposed to be.
Which sounds great, and it sounds so easy, and it's like, okay, Justin, that's great, but I mean, you're right though, because you have to define the standard for your life and what those labels will be that you accept or reject. Because really, when we classify and categorize, we're putting a label on things, right? We're putting these ideas in different buckets, and then we're putting a label on them. So,
Yes.
toxic masculinity means something to you that it may mean different to me, just even those two words. And even manhood and womanhood can mean two different things to you and to me as well. So I'm a big proponent of defining terms and language. And I know that you love, the science of language and all of that. And I'm thinking about, and I talk a lot about this on the podcast, season 1, season 2, listeners, about the meaning that we attribute to the stories that we tell ourselves, which equal our narrative and our self-narrative. And then the self-talk, which is, how are you talking to yourself inside of your head? You have the longest and most rich conversation with yourself than you will ever have with anyone else on this earth, right? Because your brain's always talking to yourself. So Justin, how do men, number one, become aware of their self-talk and their self-narrative? And then how can they shift it, change it, impact it, all of those things, because it matters.
It does. And there's so many ways we could go with it there, because a lot of our behavior is, affected by the fear that gets triggered in us, whether it's the fear of looking bad, the fear of failure, the fear of embarrassment, the fear of not knowing what's going on in a situation, exposure to something new. Fear is a huge driver in things that we do or things that we avoid doing. And it's really something that you have to accept. And this goes along with that inner critic, that inner voice. I think we talked about this before, Michelle, but something I passed on to my clients is naming that inner critic, and just like giving it a name so you can distance yourself from it, because it is that ego that gets triggered by our emotions in a way to protect us from our environment. And so my inner voice, his name is Fred. And Fred's a lazy bastard. Like I hear him, when I'm in the gym. I hear him when I'm working on my business, and it's like, hey, Fred, I hear you, but I need you to go sit in the corner and watch right now while I finish the task that I'm going to do. And it's almost an empowering thing to do. Like, it may be silly, right? You
I'm
may
on
think on the
timeout.
surface. Yeah, it's like, but you may think I'm talking to myself. Like, why would I want to do that? It's a way to separate yourself from, thoughts that pop up, because we are not our thoughts. We have so many thoughts that come across our mind, and the ones we grab onto are the ones that we end up creating action behind and defining ourselves with. And so when you hear that voice in your head, like if you're working on a project or you're in the gym and it's like, hey, Michelle, we're good. We did enough for today. You can just go sit on the couch, have a glass of wine, and then, like, that's good. We're done. Let's be comfortable. And you hear that, and you can just be like, okay, that's me telling me I need a break. I need to go quit for the day. Or you can go, hang on, that's Sally chiming in. and I don't want to listen to her right now because I'm in the middle of something. Like, maybe some emotions came up because you were having some difficulty with a project you're working on, or came across something that triggered an emotion, which triggers that ego, which is like giving you that talk, like, we need to go be in our comfort zone. But you need to be able to distance yourself from that voice and go let it sit in the corner.
So how do you access the stronger you to put Sally in the corner or put Fred in the corner?
It's really a lot about self-awareness
Mm.
and hearing it, because I think if you take a tactical pause before you act on the thoughts that come across your mind, and this takes practice. I'm not gonna lie and say that it's easy and it's something you can go, oh yeah, tomorrow I'm just gonna take a pause before I act on any of the thoughts. It takes a lot of self-awareness to be able to do that. You have a thought come across your mind, you may be about to act on it, and you go, hang on a minute, do I really want this? Is this something that is going to help me meet my goals? Is this something that aligns with my beliefs and my values? Or is it being stemmed by the emotions that I'm feeling right now? And then you can go, okay, I don't want this. Let me, stop that thought from happening and distance myself from that and choose different action. Be like, thanks, but no thanks. Let me go in this direction. Because I know we started talking about how important the words that we use are, because even the words that come out of our mouth are so important. And that is another aspect that takes a lot of self-awareness. It's like different levels. Like, a thought comes through, it's like, can we filter that out? We might start saying something, and I think a good term for it, I've called it different things, but I think there's a list of sabotage words that I share with my clients. And they're words that we use on a regular basis. Like, we have conversations, and what ends up happening is these conversations mean nothing. So it's like, hey Michelle, I'm trying a new diet plan, and you're like, oh, that's great. I wanted to do that too. And I'm like, yeah, I've been planning on doing this for a while. Oh, I'd love to do this. I've meant to do this. I should do this. What did we talk about? We talked about nothing. There was zero action there. It was just undermining language completely.
Well, it's
But
passive language.
sure, yeah, but there's no action behind it. And so we talk about the things that we want to do or need to do or love to do, but we talk about it in a way that gives us a way out.
Mm.
And so it's really important to be very matter of fact with the words that we use, because our subconscious is always listening. Because if you say, I'm going to try to go to the gym today, your subconscious just listen to that and go, he didn't really mean it. If we fail, it's okay. If we don't go to the gym, it's okay. We'll just push it off to another time.
And we're just thinking about it anyway.
Exactly. Rather than saying, I will go to the gym today. I am going to the gym today.
What about I'm working on? Like, if I were to say I'm working on.
And I get a lot of pushback on this. Yeah, decluttering your mind, just kind of figuring out like how is this going to play out. But when I get the pushback on this, because it's like, oh well, that's not. I don't think that's that important. The best example I can give you and your listeners is I dare you to walk up to your spouse and say, I'll try to be faithful to you. How
That's
about,
not going to go over very
how
well.
about I want, no, it's not. How about I want to be faithful to you? I plan to be faithful to you.
Even I'm working on it.
I'll
That
start to
doesn't
be
apply
faithful.
either.
Exactly. None of those apply because there is doubt in there.
Mm-hmm.
We want 100% certainty when we give that statement to someone or receive that statement. I will be faithful to you. I am going to be faithful to you. So why do we talk about our goals and our dreams and our actions with a way where we're giving ourselves a way out?
Well,
It doesn't work.
let me bring this to you, because I know that, number one, like you said, self-awareness is that first piece, right? And so not everybody
Mhm.
pays attention to their thoughts, not everybody is mindful, not everybody is self-aware. But when you, for me at least, when I was shifting my narratives and changing my self-talk and taking language out of my vocabulary, so I don't use try, I usually say working towards, but now I'm even questioning that after talking to you. Because you don't want to give room to excuses. And that's one thing that I committed to. I vowed and committed a couple of years ago, no more excuses. And so my husband, we've been married almost 14 years now. He's got in his head, well, I know you because I know your patterns. I've watched you, I've studied you. And in my head, I'm like, well, you need to allow room to grow because I'm changing and developing. So when I took excuses
Sure.
away, oftentimes he'll look at me surprised when I'll say something that I refuse to acknowledge an excuse. I refuse to put an excuse out there. Um, but so part of it is deleting the language, but also replacing it with
Yeah.
something like you said, I will do, and committing to it. And
Mhm.
you're talking a lot about behavior and choices. How does someone start to choose differently so that it impacts their behaviors through the actions that they take?
Well, again, it goes back to starting with the thoughts, which turn into words, which then turn into actions. So when you change the thoughts that you grab onto, and then you can change the words that you put out into the world, then you end up changing the actions that you do take. Because if you stop yourself from saying, I'll try to do this, and you go, hang on a minute, because I still have to do it. It's not 100%. Like this vocabulary is ingrained into us, and the undermining behavior is ingrained to us in what as well. So I find myself doing it, but again, it's that self-awareness piece to where I have to say, if I'm saying I'll try to, hang on, I will do this. I am going to do this. I have to stop myself and interrupt myself. And so having a partner do it is fine, like is great. If you and your spouse or you and your friend can be on the same page as far as deleting these sabotage words from your vocabulary, awesome. Or if it's about hiring a coach, I talk to my clients about this, but it's a struggle sometimes because look, I may only have you for an hour a week or an hour or two every 2 weeks, and it's like on that phone call, I'm going to kick your butt every time I hear those words come across. I'm like, hey, did you hear it? Did you hear what you just said? Let's rephrase it. Like, how do you want to rephrase that sentence there? And they're like, okay, all right, I'm not going to plan to do it. I will do it. But
So
you have to get into that behavior.
let me ask you then. So is that skill building?
Sure. I think it comes to the self-awareness and repetitive behavior. You have to practice that because it's again, it is not another easy task to delete these words from your vocabulary and catch yourself from using these. And there's different categories of these words that are prevalent. The stop action verbs, like the ones I listed, are the most prevalent, but there's other ones that pop up in different areas, one being absolutes. Now, absolutes are like always, never, every, none. And what happens, those show up in our arguments with our spouse, with our friend. You always do this. You never do this. You only do this when no one ever. And guess what?
It's
They are
not true.
never, they're never accurate.
Right.
Never.
My husband and I get into that all the time because he goes, "You always," and I said, "Hold up," because I don't always, as evidenced
Mhm.
by last week I blah 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 blah, and then he has
Yeah.
to take it back and say, "Well, okay, well, most of the time, okay, fine, I'll accept most of the time, but I no longer accept those absolutes from him." But I feel like it's skill building and training in that sense
Mhm.
that then feeds into the confidence that you were talking about, which is the behavior and the actions, right?
Yeah. Exactly. Because once you start changing your behavior and you start taking the actions, and you combine that with the authenticity of just owning who you are and making these purposeful choices. Because guess what? When you start using phrases like "I will do something," "I am going to accomplish that," that by itself can create a perception of confidence.
Mm. Is it okay? Let me ask you this. So, if I'm on my journey, right,
Mhm.
and I'm choosing to be more confident, to show up in truth, which authenticity and owning yourself to me equal truth. So, when I say
Yeah.
showing up in truth, we're saying the same thing. So, if I'm on that journey, and I forgot my question. I got out of the flow because in my head I'm thinking about tactical because you used that word a couple times and it's been knocking on my brain this whole conversation because I'm like, well, what does he mean by tactical? Um, and I
it's
guess
it's like
so.
a
Let me ask you now.
purposeful choice to take an action.
That's
Like
what tactical.
I yeah, and however you use it, because one thing I talk about is taking a tactical pause. Whether
Right.
it's from your thoughts, or when an emotion is triggered, or before you enter a new situation and you're like, who do I want to show up through this threshold that I'm about to walk through? So there's different times in our lives and our day that we can take that tactical pause, but it's about being purposeful and having a mission, you know, focused on, like, what do I want to accomplish with this here?
Hmm.
And so that's how I use tactical. Obviously it
So
goes in the background as well.
let me feed it back to you to make sure I'm understanding correctly. Um, Tactical equals choosing a purposeful, mission driven choice,
Hmm.
whether that is language, whether that is thought, behavior, action, how I show up in the world, whatever it is.
Yes.
Yay, I learned something. That is awesome. I love that. I love that. And I love language anyway, but and I think that the word, the way you were using tactical was tripping me up. So I love that. Listeners, I hope that you're following us because we're in the flow and going, but I feel like this is so value added because people don't always break down the concepts. And I feel
Mhm.
like there's such a saturation of all of these new coaches that came from 2020 and us working from home, which
Sure.
no shade. Do your thing. But I think that there's a loss of the definition and the strategic tactical application that is really what is transformative for people in becoming the best version of themselves. So I
Well
love
said.
the work that you do with men especially because my opinion, and you can correct me if I'm wrong because you're more of the expert, is that men are very underserved in the areas of mental health and emotional awareness
Mhm.
training. Making that normalized, that just because you have an emotion doesn't mean you're any less of a man if you display it or show it or express it.
Mhm.
Um, and you don't
Well, it's
always have to
supply and
express.
demand,
Yeah.
because men don't ask for it. Men don't want that. Men think we don't need it, and so
Well, how would
of
you know that
course.
you need it if no one's ever told you that it's okay? Women, we're taught to need it. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, exactly. And it's we're on different sides of the spectrum, because there's this stigma about emotions, that emotions are bad, because women are told you have too many emotions and men are told you should have no emotions. And so we're on complete opposite sides of the spectrum, but we're both being told that emotions are bad.
Mm,
And that's not true. I
agree.
believe that emotions are either useful or not useful based on the context of the situation.
Which
And
is
so,
interesting because I define emotions as indicators. So really it's just a location on a map. And then you
mhm,
take it that next step to how are you going to use that information in a tactical way?
yeah, because I base everything off of the 7 universal emotions. Dr. Paul Ekman talks about this. It's more related to micro expressions, because there's 7 universal emotions that we express in the face, regardless of where you're from on this planet, race, color, creed, gender, national origin. We all express these 7 emotions in our face in the same way. And it's happiness, anger, sadness, disgust, contempt, surprise, and fear. And those are the 7 universal emotions. And we experience them all in different intensity levels. We can think high, medium, and low intensity. But if you look at that list, out of the 7, really happy is the only one that people would consider a good emotion. And everything else, fear, disgust, contempt, surprise is kind of a neutral one. Maybe it could be considered happy. Fear, anger, contempt, those all sound negative, right? So I like what you said, calling them indicators, because that emotions are indicators. Emotions are involuntary responses to our environment. And so an emotion comes up and it was like, ding, something's going on that I don't really enjoy. Or maybe it's a little bit is pattern recognition. Like, I've been in a similar situation before. I don't feel comfortable with what's happening here. So a certain emotion may get triggered. Now, how we use that emotion, how we respond, because there's a difference between reacting to our emotions and responding. If we let our emotions run the show, then we react. Someone says, "You're a jerk." And I'm like, no, I'm not. You're the jerk. That was a reaction. Now, if a response would be if someone called me a jerk, it'd be like, okay, well, what makes you say that I'm a jerk? There's a clear difference between reacting to what someone says and responding to what someone says.
That
And
tactical
so
pause.
it is, because, and it doesn't mean that the emotions won't get triggered, because if someone calls you a jerk, it may trigger anger. But the funny thing is when you take a tactical pause and you feel that anger, you acknowledge the anger. It's like, I'm a little bothered that this person just called me a jerk. Okay, I can't control what just came out of their mouth. Do I want to react or do I want to respond? And there's actually some science behind this. I talked to a great guy. His name is Jim Vave. He runs, his company is 6 seconds. It's 6 seconds something. I feel bad for not quoting it right. But he talks about how our emotions dissipate. The chemicals in our brain and our body dissipate after about 6 seconds.
Really?
So if you give it that 6-second pause, that like rush of emotion actually dissipates. And so taking that moment to go, okay, what that person said just made me angry. I have to acknowledge it, point out the specific emotion. We talked about the emotional vocabulary last time, the emotional matrix. Acknowledge that emotion, take that pause, and then respond. Because is the anger useful in that conversation? No.
Well, it might be. I mean, there's
It could
sometimes you can have
be.
a righteous, justifiable anger towards something. For
Sure.
me, being a clinical social worker, when I walk into a house and I'm, looking at a 2-year-old who's been sexually abused for her entire life, yeah, I'm angry. Absolutely. But
But is it
like
useful?
it is useful because
So
it helps.
justified and useful are different.
Well, I found it useful when I was active in the field because it helped me to not feel guilty for
Okay.
removing a child from a home because I
Okay,
have
so you
such a
used it as
strong.
fuel. Then
Yeah.
I agree with that. In that context, the anger is useful. But if that anger turned into like it clouds your judgment, or you're unable to do your job. So it depends on turning it into the fuel, and that's a huge factor with emotions, which is a whole different way to go with it. But surface level, you can assess whether an emotion is useful or not. I give a traffic accident example. Say you get cut off in traffic. First thing that happens, the fear response kicks in. Oh no, this car's almost about to hit me. You hit the brakes, you swerve your wheel, you get out of the way. The fear triggered and you reacted. If you had to think about it, oh no, this car is coming. What should I do? Oh, I should hit the brake. You're going to get in an accident if you respond, if you take that tactical pause. So you reacted, you avoided it. What comes next? Anger. You inconsiderate jerk. What, you're in front of me. You cut me off. So the fear was useful. Is the anger useful in that context?
No, but and what's interesting is as you were saying that, my response, because I was thinking in my head, I was following you and like, how would I respond? My immediate response, because I've trained myself to respond this way, is gratitude. Because I would go into, oh, thank God
Mm,
he didn't hit me,
I
versus
like that.
anger.
I like
But that's
that.
but that's training, like you
It
said.
is training because
It
that's
takes
not the average response.
exactly. The average response is the finger goes up, and yeah, I get it.
Sure.
But I have been very intentional over the past, I can't even count how many years now, to train my brain to respond in gratitude. And so now it shows up almost automatically without thinking.
I would
Um,
challenge you to heighten your self-awareness in that type of incident again. What I believe happens, because anger and fear are tied very closely.
hmm,
I believe that you have learned to acknowledge the anger and then immediately turn to gratitude.
that's
But there's
probably
an
true,
anger, there's anger in between the fear and the gratitude.
even if
I
it's a
would
millisecond.
challenge you to heighten your self-awareness. When that happens again, I hope you don't get in an accident. But if that happens again, or a situation like that where you normally turn to gratitude because you trained yourself to do that, be aware of the anger that triggers in between, because fear and anger are very closely linked.
That's very interesting. And it's when I was thinking, because I was imagining my commute in my head, and when traffic happens and I'm frustrated, because I don't
Mm.
really get angry. And so I'm really thinking about, have I just transferred the language of anger to frustration,
So,
irritation?
so frustration. I'm going to say this for you and your audience. Stop using frustrated and concerned as an emotional word.
Okay, tell me why.
It's it's like using a shotgun to pinpoint your emotions, because you need to get laser focused with your emotions. Frustrated could be angry and contemptuous. It could be disgusted and sad. Like
Hmm,
frustrated and concerned are combinations of emotional words. You
interesting.
have to get laser focused. You have to be that sniper and go, I'm irritated, I'm worried, I'm anxious. There's certain words that are very specific to the emotions that are coming up. So I would challenge you to stop using frustrated or concerned and dig deeper to what is behind the frustration. Like, what about it makes you frustrated?
What I love about that is it's training you to be curious
Mm,
rather than responsive or even
yes.
reactionary. Get curious about, why do I respond this way? Why do I think this? What is the root of that tree really, producing? Because if I'm saying I want to be a peach tree because peaches are sweet and so nice, and they're juicy and just so refreshing on a summer day, but I keep showing up and people keep picking apples off of me, I'm not a peach tree. So I got to go to the root and dig up the root of the apple tree and plant the peach tree, right? I always go back to the
I
trees.
like that. I like that idea of being curious, and I think that's really what it is. And for me, it interests me. The human behavior aspect of it is so interesting, and peeling apart that and going, what makes us act like this? Like how do we make these choices? Like what is going on behind the scenes to drive this behavior, to drive
Mm,
these emotions?
yeah.
I think that's a great way to put it. Is be curious about the emotions that are coming up, because that ties back into that emotional matrix, is finding those specific emotions, making that list of emotions, and then going back and go, why was I anxious? Why was I worried? Why was I bothered or
Or
displeased?
feeling
And
shame or
asking
angry,
yourself,
or yeah.
yeah, exactly. But getting specific, and again, throw frustrated and concerned out the window. They are not emotional words. They are a collection of different combinations of emotional words.
I'm going to be the sniper, laser focused.
Yes.
I love that. I love that. Thank you for that. I mean, wisdom nuggets, listeners, people watching, you put hashtag like, share this video, forward it, like it, comment. I mean, Justin is just dropping bombs for real. I love it. So one thing as we come to the close of our conversation, that I want to mention is, number one, Justin has agreed off air that he will be collaborating in the collab corner. And so I'll be talking more about that as season 3 progresses. We've already got the first one out, but it is VIP content. So drop your name below, successfuldiligence.com/contact to send me an email, collab corner VIP. I want the insider scoop, however you want to phrase it, so that I can get that out to you, because it is going to be specialized content. Click the link in the show notes for the newsletter. And I want to talk more, Justin, because I know that you do coaching, but you've got a special event coming up in February 2021. Talk to me
Yes.
more about this new venture that you are doing.
I'm super excited, and this has been one of the things I've been working on since the year started. And we have, I think it's like 28, 29 different speakers. It's a virtual summit. It's a Confidence Unchained virtual summit, and it is focused for men. It's on men helping men, so that it's all male speakers that are out there from every walks of life. And if you check out my website, my 3 pillars that I talk about are mental toughness, emotional fortitude, and health awareness.
Mm.
And that's where these speakers fall into these different categories. We've got, health and fitness experts. We've got emotional intelligence coaches. We've got peak performance coaches out there. I think I was
Paul Fortune talking about mindset.
Yes. Yeah. We've got so many great speakers. We could list some if you wanted, but it's an amazing list of men.
Well, I have got your website up. So Sean Pete talking about transforming failure, Nathan Kohlerman, purpose, power, and passion, Tim Douglas, high performance coach, face the storm. You've got Lucas Mark, who is an author and speaker and catalyst, which I love that word, healing truth. You've got Jay Azeltine, speaker talk title. That's interesting. Human optimization experts. The language that you use in all of your content, by the way, y'all got to follow him on Facebook and LinkedIn. He has really up-leveled his game. I'm talking about Justin now, in terms of the content delivery, because even if you don't go to the summit, if you don't sign up for coaching, if you just follow him, your life will change. Because when he says mental fortitude and mental toughness, emotional fortitude, like, he's telling the truth. He will drop the bombs and convict you from the morning, and you're like thinking about his post all day long, like, wow, he just like kicked my butt this morning. Okay, Justin, I got you. I hear you.
Thank you, Michelle.
So the
thank you for that.
The summit is summit.confidenceunchanged.com. I will put the link in the show notes as well, so you can click and check out all the speakers, because I didn't even list half of them. Just amazing, amazing men talking to men.
It's a free event.
It's free?
Event.
Oh my gosh, you guys, go sign up now. Click that link and then come back and listen to the rest of our conversation. But for a free event, you cannot beat free for the amazing level of content you're going to get. And what I love, Justin, and the reason I promote you so highly and so much, because I think you've noticed I've been sharing your content all over, is that you specialize in men. Now, as a woman, I benefit, because it's number one, it's helped me with my marriage, because I'm understanding how the male mind works. I'm understanding how to interact better, with a man, because my husband is very much in tune with how you coach people and what that manly man type of man is. So he resonates very, very much with your brand. But I love that it's specific to men, because there's a lot out there for women, especially in today's society. There's a lot out there that is focused on empowering the woman. And no shade, I'm a woman, I do it too. But I love that there's that pocket of expertise that is quality and specific, especially for men, because I really do believe that you guys are underserved. So y'all, click the link. It's a free event. Go sign up, go attend. What are the dates? February?
It's February 25th, 26th, and 27th. So it's a 3-day event. It's like really 2.5 days. And we're splitting the speakers up, and there's the schedules up for the different speakers. And I'm super excited. And I think you touched on a great thing there. Because like you said, like we talked about at the beginning, men are underserved because it is a supply and demand thing. And so I think my purpose for this was really focusing on men and giving men a space to go like, where can I get some information? And men having these conversations, because all of the speakers shared their stories of their own trials and tribulations and the things that they struggled with as a man and how they came out the other side of that. But that doesn't mean that women wouldn't get anything from watching this, because the tools that everyone shares, it's universal.
So
They
that means
work.
I can sign up.
Yes, you can, Michelle. You can definitely sign up.
This is excitement. This is happy. I'm so stoked that I can listen in because
Yes,
it really
100%.
it's and women, the women who listen to me and women who are watching, the reason I'm so pumped about it is because if you're single and you want a relationship with a man or a marriage, or you have a father or a brother or a cousin or a homie or a friend, you want the relationship to be healthy, right? And how do you function in health? You do that through truth, and you do that through understanding and applying, choosing, using tactical wisdom so that you can implement action of choice to be healthy. And the only way to do that is to get knowledge and understanding. And there's certain things that only men know, and men communicating to men can share.
Yes.
Just like there's certain things that women know that women can only communicate to women. And if you know, if you know, my belief is that I believe in God. So God created man and women equal in value, but different in function because we have different roles. I am not strong. I will never bench press. What is it, 315 that you can do without thinking? I will never do that. However, there are things that I can do that Justin will never be able to do, right? And that is not a bad thing. Him and his girlfriend are a perfect balance because you fill in the gap, right? And the holes it's like a puzzle piece that comes together, and we need each other. And so that's why I'm so excited and stoked that I can come in and listen and it's free. That's amazing.
Well, plus I've had a lot of women reach out and go, can I share this with my boyfriend, or can I share it with my ex-boyfriend? I've had a couple of those. They're like, I really need to pass this on to someone I used to date, or their brother or whoever. So it's definitely great information. And Michelle, I'm glad that you have me on here to be able to share this. I love talking with you. I love coming on your podcast. I'm excited for all our collaboration in the future. So thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited, Michelle.
I am stoked and cannot wait for you to come back. I will put all of the links to all your things in the show notes. Is there anything that you want to leave the audience with before we end our conversation?
I think it's kind of circle back to the authenticity part, because that's one of the staples that I really function on, is being yourself, figuring out what that is, and not caring what anyone else thinks about that. Stop looking over your shoulder for approval, no matter what you're doing. If you're working on a project, if you're out dancing, whatever it is, just stop looking around. Just focus on what you're doing. Focus on the moment, because right now, this moment right here is the only moment we ever really have.
I love that. I absolutely love that. And listeners, as you know, I always say, keep walking. Never, ever stop walking. Because if you continue to walk, you will reach your destiny. You will reach your destination. And on the journey, I encourage you to always, always choose gratitude.